Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're tackling home preparedness.
Ooh, home preparedness.
Yeah, we've got some great material to work with. We're going to be looking at excerpts from the Ultimate Suburban Survival
Okay.
audiobook by Sean Brodrick.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it's pretty in-depth, and it's going to give us, I think, a really solid foundation for getting ready for anything.
Okay.
Whether it's, just a power outage or something a little bit more serious.
Right. It's interesting how he goes beyond that kind of like typical prepper advice, just like stockpile food and water.
Right.
He really talks about creating a safe haven in a world that feels increasingly unpredictable.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that stuck with me was just how he doesn't really sugarcoat it. He throws out some statistics that I think are meant to kind of wake you up.
Oh, yeah.
Like, did you know that Americans use an average of 1.2 gallons of gas per person every single day?
Wow.
So just imagine if that supply chain was disrupted. I mean,
That's a lot.
that's a recipe for chaos right there.
Yeah. And he actually connects that to historical examples of like food riots.
Right.
During past crises.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I think for me, the big example that he brings up is Hurricane Katrina,
Oh, yeah.
which is just like a stark reminder of how quickly things can unravel,
Right.
even in like a developed country.
Yeah.
So it really underscores why being prepared is relevant for everyone, not just like,
Oh.
quote unquote doomsday preppers.
It's about resilience, not giving in to fear.
Right. Exactly.
And speaking of resilience, I thought it was interesting how he talks about, your home as a refuge, and it's not just about stocking up on supplies, right?
Yeah. He goes deep into home security
Yeah.
and highlights like even just simple hardening techniques.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some of those?
Things like reinforcing your doors, having visible deterrents,
Okay.
just to make your home less appealing to potential threats.
So thinking about your own home right now, are there any kind of security measures you have in place?
Yeah, well, so I'm a renter, so some of those modifications aren't really an option
Okay.
for me. But it did get me thinking about, what I can do,
Right.
like improving the lighting around my entryway,
Oh,
making
right.
sure my locks are solid,
Yeah.
just those little things.
That's a great starting point. I mean, you're already thinking critically about your unique situation.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, what's important.
And remember, it's about layers,
Yeah.
He also highlights the importance of community and specifically neighborhood watch programs.
I tend to think of those as being mainly for crime prevention.
They are.
Yeah.
But in a crisis, those existing relationships and communication channels
Oh,
can be invaluable.
I see.
So think of it as building a network of support that extends beyond just your own household.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
And that kind of ties into, what you were saying about building connections and fostering community resilience.
It's not about being a lone wolf prepper. It's about being part of a prepared community. All right, so let's get into some of the nitty-gritty here, some of the practical preparations that Brodrick covers.
Yeah.
He breaks things down in terms of water, sanitation, and electricity.
The essentials. Let's
Yeah.
start with water.
Okay.
Storage is essential. Of course, purification is crucial.
Right.
But what I thought was interesting was his emphasis on rainwater catchment systems.
Rainwater. Now, that's a pretty clever idea. I'm really into sustainable living.
Yeah.
So that definitely piqued my interest. How does that even work?
Well, it's surprisingly simple. You're basically collecting rainwater from your roof
Mhm.
and storing it for later use.
Oh,
So it's like a free, sustainable water source,
I love that.
which, aligns with your, eco-conscious lifestyle.
Yeah, for sure. We should look into some DIY guides later on that.
We should.
All right, let's move on to the less glamorous side of things. Sanitation. I'll admit it's not my favorite topic,
Yeah.
but I know it's important.
It is.
What does Brodrick suggest?
Well, he acknowledges the ick factor,
Mm.
but he handles it with practicality and a little bit of humor.
Okay.
He talks about alternative solutions like sawdust toilets,
Sawdust toilets.
which might sound strange at first,
Yeah.
but they're a proven method for managing waste when traditional systems are unavailable.
I've never encountered anything like that. I remember going on camping trips as a kid, and we'd have those, portable chemical toilets.
Right.
But sawdust is definitely a new one for me. It
Yeah.
makes you realize how much we take basic sanitation for granted.
Absolutely. It's one of those things you don't think about until it's gone.
Right.
And when it comes to preparedness,
Mm-hmm.
maintaining hygiene is crucial for
Yeah.
health and well-being.
Okay, so we've covered clean water and handling waste. What about keeping the lights on?
Right.
Brodrick gets into some technical stuff with electricity, which can feel overwhelming.
He does, but he breaks it down in a way that makes it more approachable.
Okay, good.
He explains the basics of power needs like watts and surge watts, which are crucial for understanding what you can actually run on a backup power source.
All right.
And he even goes beyond generators and discusses inverters and deep cycle batteries.
I've heard of inverters. What are deep cycle batteries?
So they're specially designed to provide a steady stream of power over a longer period.
I see.
Unlike your car battery, which is designed for like short bursts of energy.
Okay.
So it really opens up options for people with different budgets and technical comfort levels.
I like that it's about finding solutions that fit your individual needs and circumstances.
Exactly. Preparedness isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. It's about identifying your vulnerabilities and addressing them in a way that makes sense for you.
Makes sense. You know, it's amazing how many different aspects of preparedness there are to consider.
It is.
But he doesn't just focus on surviving.
Right.
He talks about thriving in a changed world,
Yeah.
and I think that really appeals to me.
That's a great point. And speaking of thriving, he highlights practical skills.
Yes.
Something I know you're passionate about, as a lifelong learner.
He talks a lot about gardening, and not just for, putting food on the table.
Right.
He emphasizes heirloom seeds.
Oh, yeah.
Which I found fascinating.
Why do you think that resonated with you?
Well, remembering our conversation about, sustainability and rainwater harvesting.
Right.
Heirloom seeds just seem like a natural extension of that.
Yeah.
The idea of creating a self-sustaining food source that you can save seeds from year after year feels incredibly empowering.
I agree.
It's like having a little piece of food security right in your backyard.
It's a brilliant way to connect those interests.
Yeah.
And it speaks to that broader theme of preparedness not being about deprivation,
Right.
but about creating abundance and resilience in your life.
And it's not just about practical skills like gardening.
All right.
He also talks about medicinal herbs.
Oh, yeah.
Which I found really intriguing.
He mentions specific plants like aloe and garlic.
Oh, wow.
And their various uses.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much knowledge about natural remedies has been passed down through generations.
It really is. It makes you realize that preparedness isn't just about having the right gear.
Right.
It's also about having the knowledge and skills to make use of what's around you.
Exactly.
Speaking of knowledge, Brodrick also addresses the importance of education and entertainment when the world unplugs. You know what I really love is how he focuses on activities that build skills and provide enrichment.
Yeah.
Especially for families.
Especially for families, yeah.
Board games were a highlight for me.
Yeah.
He talks about Liar's Dice and the dictionary game.
Well, those are fun.
I know both low-cost and intellectually stimulating options.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of board games myself.
Me too.
They're a great way to connect with people and keep your mind sharp.
Absolutely, even when there's no electricity.
Yeah.
What I found particularly fascinating was his mention of learning primitive skills.
Yes, taking a step back in time and rediscovering the ingenuity of our ancestors.
Learning something like fire starting
Right.
not only fosters self-sufficiency, but also connects us to the past, even to our community, if we share those skills with others.
Absolutely.
Okay, I want to be realistic here.
Yeah.
Sometimes staying put isn't an option.
Right.
What does Brodrick say about bugging out?
Well, he acknowledges that evacuation might be necessary and provides a framework to make it less daunting.
Okay.
He talks about different types of bug-out bags.
Okay.
One for your car, one for your house, each tailored to specific situations.
That makes sense because you might not need everything in your house bag if you're just evacuating to a friend's place across town.
Exactly. He doesn't just give you a generic list.
Right.
He explains the why behind each item.
Yeah.
Which makes the process feel more strategic and less overwhelming.
Yeah.
For example, he recommends packing a pointed shovel for waste disposal.
Okay.
It sounds simple, but in an emergency situation, having the right tools for sanitation can be crucial.
It's those little details that can make a big difference.
Right.
Now, if you do have to evacuate, planning your escape route is essential.
It is.
What does Brodrick suggest?
He emphasizes having multiple routes mapped out in advance, using tools like Google Maps to identify back roads and potential choke points.
Right.
This is where having a good understanding of your local area comes in handy.
Yeah.
Do you have any specific evacuation routes in mind for your neighborhood?
I haven't really thought about it in detail. I guess I've always assumed I would just follow the main roads out of town.
Right.
But now that you mention it,
Yeah.
knowing some alternate routes, especially ones that are less likely to get congested, would be really smart.
It's all about having options and thinking ahead.
Yeah.
And speaking of options,
Okay.
Brodrick talks about the concept of safe houses,
Okay.
which ties back into the importance of community.
You mean having a designated place to go if you can't stay at home?
Exactly. And it works best as a reciprocal agreement.
Oh.
You might offer your home as a safe house to someone in your network,
Yeah.
knowing that they would do the same for you.
Okay.
It's about pooling resources and looking out for each other.
That's a really powerful idea.
It is.
It reinforces the idea that preparedness isn't just about individual survival.
Right.
It's about collective resilience.
Exactly.
But what if you're the one offering shelter?
Yeah.
That can feel overwhelming too.
Brodrick addresses that as well.
Oh, good.
He talks about setting clear expectations with anyone you take in
Okay.
and establishing basic rules and responsibilities.
Yeah.
It's about creating a sense of order and cooperation in what could potentially be a very stressful situation.
That's really helpful.
Yeah.
It takes some of the fear and uncertainty out of the equation.
Yeah.
It makes the whole concept of mutual aid feel much more approachable. Man, we've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
From securing your home to mapping out escape routes and even fostering community connections.
Yeah.
It's been eye-opening, to say the least.
It really highlights how preparedness goes beyond just having a stockpile of supplies.
Right.
It's about knowledge skills
Yeah.
and building resilience in all aspects of your life.
You know, Brodrick emphasizes that taking action, however small,
Right.
is a step in the right direction.
Baby step.
Even if you just start with the bare minimum, he suggests it's still progress.
It is.
I feel like I have a much clearer understanding of where to begin.
Yeah.
And that feels really good.
That's good. I'm glad. And that brings us to kind of a final thought I want to leave you with.
Okay.
Preparedness is an ongoing journey, not a destination.
Okay.
It's about constantly learning, adapting, and fine-tuning your approach based on your unique situation and evolving knowledge.
That makes sense. The world's constantly changing.
Right.
So our approach to preparedness has to evolve too.
It has to.
It's like leveling up in a video game, right?
It is.
You gain experience, you unlock new skills,
Right.
and you become more resilient along the way.
Exactly. And just like in those games, the real reward is in the journey itself.
You know, the process of learning, exploring, and connecting with others who share similar goals.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Mm-hmm.
what aspects of preparedness resonated most strongly with you?
Let me think.
What are you most interested in exploring further?
Well, personally, I'm really intrigued by that concept of rainwater harvesting
Yeah.
and incorporating more medicinal herbs into my daily life.
Okay.
Those feel like really tangible steps I can take right away.
I'm with you on that. I'm also really inspired by the idea of building stronger community connections.
Yes.
Through things like neighborhood watch programs and reciprocal safe house agreements.
It all comes back to community.
It does. It feels good to know that we're not alone in this.
You're not.
Remember, knowledge is power.
It is.
And in this context, it can be the key to not just surviving, but thriving,
Thriving, that's the goal.
no matter what challenges come our way.
Right.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into home preparedness.
Yeah, this is a good one.
We hope you found it valuable and empowering.
I hope so. And remember, the best time to start preparing is now.
Now is always the best time.
Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next time.